Good evening, everyone. So today's session, glad to have you all here. So since College Board announced about the digital SCT in last January, we all are very curious to know what's the change, and we have to plan our preparation accordingly also. So Aaron is here. He's from US. He's a former the Princeton Review Content Director of the SAT and other high school test also. Aaron was responsible for all the Princeton Review materials for the SAT, ACT, etc. And he also directed the design, creation, and implementation of the TPR SAT course. Aaron is also a star SAT tutor. Aaron's students have been accepted by Ivy League schools, Stanford and MIT, and other top universities as well. Glad to have you here, Aaron. Good evening. We are also going to see about how SAT is accepted in India and what is SAT optional, test optional, or test blind. We hear a lot of terms in nowadays, actually, at least from the COVID time, we are hearing test optional and test blind. So we are going to see what is actually that means. Okay. So first, I will start the session with the SAT quick facts and the acceptance of the SAT by the Indian universities. Later on, Aaron will take us through in detail about the digital SAT. Let's start. Okay. So I'm here, Nirmala Shivakumar from Manya Products team. So I'll take you through the quick facts. It's really going to be quick because I know you all know about the SAT already, and the subject is relevant to the acceptance of India and the digital SAT. So I will not take much time here. Okay, what is the SAT? If you know, you can type in the chat. Okay, let us try to be interactive here. Already I have one question here. Is SAT optional this year as well? We're going to see all these things in the later part of the webinar today. Okay. Okay, I have some responses for what is SAT, right? Okay, great. I have super answers like Scholastic Aptitude Test, a standardized test. Very good. So here, you know, SAT is a standardized test widely used for undergrad college admissions, mainly in US and a few other top universities in other countries, as well as in India. Okay, so that's the key thing. And that's a good thing for us because we can take just one SAT, one test, and we can apply globally. You can apply to US, other countries, as well as you can apply in India also. Volume is low. Okay, I'll try to be louder. What does the SAT stand for? Actually, we have so many. If you Google this, if you try to search an answer for this in the Google, then you will get so many answers like Scholastic Aptitude Test, Scholastic Assessment Test, right? A lot of answers you will be getting here. But actually, SAT stands for nothing. Okay. College Board, like at least a decade back, said it's just SAT is SAT. There is no expansion for this. And who is the maker of the SAT? The College Board, which I'm saying at least from the beginning of this webinar. The College Board is a non-profitable US-based organization. So they are the maker of this test. Mode of the test. Currently, for this year, it's going to be a paper pencil test. And later on, it's going to be digital. And the duration of the SAT is 3 hours. And including breaks, it is 3 hours and 15 minutes. Okay. Structure of the SAT. So it's a 3 hours long test, which starts with the reading test first. And reading is the longest test here. It's 65 minutes. It's just multiple choice questions, but then the passages are very dense passages. Mainly our Indian students find this reading test to be the very difficult test of the SAT. Okay, just because of how dense the passages are, that's the only reason. Okay, and coming to the next, writing and language. Okay, this is the second test. This is also passage based, which basically tests the grammar and the vocabulary in context and the other items here. Okay. These two tests along together, you get a score for the evidence-based reading and writing, which is considered as the SAT verbal score. And coming to math, you have a no calculator and yes calculator section. And there are multiple choice and grid-in questions. Basically, this tests more of algebra, and then data interpretation questions, which is related to charts, graphs, etc. Right? So you get little advanced math, maybe related to functions questions. Okay. Otherwise, math seems to be, for us, for Indian students, math seems to be really a better test compared to the reading one. Okay. So this is the current structure of the SAT. As you all know, only this is going to change. Okay. Most of the items are going to change that we are going to see now. The score, the total score is out of 400 to 1600. Okay. And apart from that, we get several other scores also. Right. Guys, you are having so many questions. I'll take up all your questions in the Q&A session, and most of your queries will be answered when you just attend this session completely. Okay. Right. Now, how SAT is accepted in India? So, India Global Higher Education Alliance. So, this is founded by the College Board itself as an initiative to have tie-ups with the Indian universities, just to simplify the admission process of the Indian universities, Indian students, basically. Okay. Since it started, they have connected with so many institutes, so many universities in India. And currently, actually, they started with just 18 around in 2019. Okay, 18 universities they connected initially, but now they have around 44 members. Okay, for this India Global Higher Education Alliance. So all these members, all these 44 universities in India accept SAT for the undergrad programs. Okay. This is the list of universities. You can see images I have pasted here. There are several private universities, top private universities in India. For example, say Ashoka University. If you want to get an international exposure still in India, then it's an Ashoka University here. You can see NMIMS, Mumbai. It's a very famous university for business administration programs. You have Shiv Nadar University, Symbiosis, Sastra. Okay, you have Iim Ranchi. You can see it's not that private universities, government institutions also. You can see Iim Ranchi, which is a very prestigious institution in India. If you want to get into IIM straight after your class 12, then you can take SAT and you can apply to IIM, which offers an integrated 5 years MBA degree. Okay, so you can see, and the list is they are adding more and more universities to this. Okay. Indian universities that accept SAT scores for all the degree programs. You can see this list of universities accept SAT for all the degree programs, and some of the universities accept SAT only for BTech programs. Likewise, the policy of the universities differ. Okay, so if you want to know exactly, I will share you this link. This is the College Board website link. You can see the list of universities in India, and you can click on this university name to understand the policies on what basis they accept the SAT and for which programs they accept the SAT, right? So I will share this link in the chat window later on. Okay, once at the end of the session, I will share you. You can check yourself as well. What is the benefits of this? We have huge benefits because of this SAT acceptance in India. Number one, without writing the JEE exams or multiple entrance exams, you know, right? If you are in class 11 or 12, now this time you might be knowing that, you know, all the private universities in India, they conduct their own entrance exams. It is very difficult for you, for the students, to take up multiple entrance exams. It takes a lot of time, preparation because the pattern varies, right? So you have to understand what is the pattern for that particular university. You have to prepare for that. You have to take that entrance exam. So it's a time and effort. Instead, you can take one test, that is SAT, and you can apply to many universities in India. Almost all the top private universities in India accept the SAT, and still you can apply to other countries also. If you're planning to apply to US or Canada or any other universities, you can still use the same SAT score. So it's just one test, one time preparation. Okay, put complete efforts for that one test, get a good score, and you can apply to India as well as abroad. The second thing why you can choose to take the SAT, because SAT is administered 5 times in a year. Almost 50 cities it is conducted, 85 plus centers are there. So you can give multiple attempts within a year. Okay, so if you are in class 10 or 11, you can give multiple attempts, right? Because it is very often conducted, like in the month of March, May, August, October, December. So several times in a year it is conducted. So you get a chance to re-attempt the test to get a better score. You can take the test as early because SAT is, students can take the SAT from class 9 to 12, and the scores are valid for 4 years. Okay, so you can take the test well in advance, maybe immediately after you finish your class 10, when you are free before you go to class 11. Okay, you can finish your SAT preparation and keep your scores ready so that when you are packed with your class 11 and 12, right, when you have no time for the SAT, you can focus on your other stuff, the academic stuff, or shortlisting the university, sending the application. There are a lot of other things you can prepare for AP exams. So there are a lot of other things. So you can prepare early because SAT math, if you take it, is only testing only class 10 math. Okay, not advanced math or tested, no trigonometry, no calculus and all. So after taking your class 10 exams, immediately you can prepare for the SAT. So that you have time for the other activities. You can send the scores free to all the Indian universities. If you're sending your scores to US or any other countries, you have to pay a fees for that. Okay, but here, if you're applying for the Indian universities with your SAT score, then it's completely free for you. And the last one is, you'll be eligible to earn a scholarship using this program, using this India Global Alliance program. They offer a lot of scholarship. So you will be eligible to earn a scholarship when you get into those university with the SAT score. Okay, so we will see what is that scholarships. Okay, one is they give SAT fee reduction vouchers. So there is a, if the household income is less than 8 lakhs, they give 90% discount on the SAT fees, right? So it will be around, in Indian rupees, it will be around 7,500 to 1,800. Okay, they give a 90% discount. And if the household income is between 8 lakh and 15 lakh, then give a 50% discount on taking the SAT exam, SAT test. Okay. Apart from that, there is a scholarships, like 100% college tuition fee scholarship, much attractive one. All through the program of study in India. Okay, the complete 3 years or 4 years, whatever you're going to do, it's a 100% tuition fee scholarship. You can see the eligibility here. Should be an Indian resident. Household income should be less than 8 lakhs per annum. And your SAT score has to be at least 1,300 out of 1,600. And you should apply to any of these universities which comes under the India Global Alliance. Okay, and you should get the admission there. And the second one is one-time scholarship fee of US dollars 1,500, which is around 1 lakh. Okay, on the tuition fee. Here, when the household income is less than 8 lakh, it is greater than 8 lakh and less than 15 lakh. Okay, and the SAT score is 1,300 out of 1,600. And if you get an admissions into any one of the participating universities, which is there in the India Global Alliance, then you get a 1,500 one-time scholarship fee. So these are a list of universities which participate in that 100% scholarship. Okay, and all the universities, all the members of the India Global Alliance give that $1,500 membership. Okay. You can see the upcoming SAT dates. Upcoming one is the March 7th, and whatever I have marked as a star is an anticipated date. Till this year, that is 2022, it's going to be a paper pencil test. From next year onwards, it's going to be a digital test. Okay. Now we are going to see more about what is the digital test. I'm handing over now to Aaron. As I said, I'll just stop sharing my screen 1 minute. Yes. Hi, Aaron.
Hello. Thank you, Namrala. All right.
Aaron will take us through the digital SAT in detail and about the SAT test optional. What does it mean exactly? Yes, Aaron.
Yes, exactly. So, as Namrala mentioned, one of the things about the SAT is that the SAT has changed actually fairly frequently since it was first administered in 1927 in the United States. So I have been teaching the SAT for 15 years now, and this upcoming digital SAT is actually going to be the third version of the SAT that I'll have taught. Back in 2005, the test changed. This is when it's no longer became known as the Scholastic Aptitude Test and became just the SAT. Some of you who may have older siblings or cousins might remember the highest test score being 2,400. That all changed in 2016 when the SAT went to its current version of the test, the one with 4 sections, 3 hours of testing material. So with breaks, with administration, a fairly long 4-hour-ish day. Now, coming in 2023, for those of us outside of the United States, the SAT is going to be a digital test. And so my goal today is to talk about what makes the SAT a digital test, what sort of changes are going to happen, but also what sort of changes are not going to happen, and what that means for all of us. We're going to want to know, obviously, what has been announced and what we're anticipating. And so once again, I have my name there, my email address. So we're going to be going over all of this. And so we're going to know what you need to do as far as preparing for the digital SAT is concerned, but also how can you make informed decisions as to whether to take the SAT this year in 2022 prior to the change, or whether you're going to want to wait until the change or some blend of the two. So first of all, the biggest, most obvious change for this SAT is that it's going to be done on the computer rather than on pencil and paper. So a couple of things to note right off the bat. First of all, College Board announced this change back in January. They have released some information about what is the digital SAT going to be like. However, they have not made full announcements on every part of what is changing. And so there will be some details that I do not know, that nobody knows. And frankly, in my experience with the previous change to the SAT, whatever College Board thinks is going to happen right this moment on whatever date today is, March 29th, 2022, will probably change by the time any of us are taking the digital SAT. But we do know quite a few things already that are going to be relevant to your decisions on how to prepare, on which test to prepare for, and certainly myself, my colleagues are already working very hard to be prepared to help you do well on the digital SAT. So first of all, the last paper SAT is going to be at the end of 2022. Starting in March 2023, outside of the United States, the SAT is going to be digital. Note that I am saying outside of the United States because the United States is going to shift over to digital later. There are a few reasons for that. One is that it's easier for the College Board to do a rollout that does not involve everyone all at once. That's the biggest reason, but those of us outside the United States are looking at the digital SAT. Now, note that I keep referring to it as the digital SAT. So you're going to be doing the test on a computer. There's not going to be Scantrons. There's not going to be a pamphlet of a test. The questions will be shown to you on the computer screen. You will have some sort of scrap paper. Perhaps it'll be a whiteboard as, for instance, the GMAT uses, but we don't know that information yet. It's really important, though, to note it is a digital test, not an online test. So, in other words, it is not going to be a test that you're going to be able to take at home or from any other location. You're still going to have to do what you have to do with the current SAT, go somewhere and take the test in a specific location. Those of you who are taking advanced placement tests back in May 2020 might have remembered College Board's experience with the AP tests, because College Board does administer the AP tests as well as the SAT, and they didn't go very well. There were a lot of difficulties. There were a lot of challenges. Many people, students, colleges, teachers, most everybody was not happy with what happened. And so we believe that College Board is really not interested in letting students take tests from home based on their experience with the advanced placement tests. And so the SAT is not going to be an at-home test. There are going to be testing in test centers. And so you're going to have a custom application. We'll talk about that in a little bit in a moment, but you're not going to be doing it online. You're going to have to take it in a test center. And so what is likely to happen will be that some of the locations that currently offer the SAT at test centers will become test centers for the digital SAT, but it is also likely the case that we may see some other locations that have equipment already available. Perhaps they administer one of the tests that is already digital. A lot of the tests for graduate school programs or business school programs, medical school are already digital tests. And so there is a possibility that some of those locations will also decide to become SAT administration places. So once again, it is not a take-home exam. You're going to have to go somewhere. There's going to be live proctors. One of the big complications with an at-home test is how do you proctor the test? How do you ensure that the person who says they're taking the test is in fact that person that's taking the test? And of course, there's also problems of people's access to quiet places, reliable internet, reliable equipment at home. And so it is a fairness issue to have the test in a centralized location. A big one for all of us located outside of the United States, they're going to add 2 more international test dates. This is something that they explicitly talked about when they announced the digital SAT, is that the administration of the pencil and paper SAT required a lot of mailing boxes across the world. There was a lot of concerns about security. And so with the digital SAT, College Board's going to be able to offer those of us outside of the United States more opportunities to take the SAT, which of course is a great positive for us. And having it in person does let there be proctors. So this addresses the security concerns of taking it at home. Unlike an at-home test, there is somebody in the room who can ensure that you are working on your SAT. You're not sharing answers with a neighbor. You are the person that you say you are because they would have checked your identification. They are also going to be available in case there are technical issues. If there is some problem with the computer you're using or with the software, rather than hoping that you can figure it out yourself, you can have somebody else just come in and fix it. So when it comes to this digital SAT, they have created an application that has already been used in certain locations in the United States. So this is not going to be something that's going to be a brand new experience come March 2023 that nobody has ever used. This is something that they have done a pilot project on. And then, of course, online tests have been a thing for years. A lot of tests have had online versions of it. So the digital SAT app has been designed in a few ways that have a few features that are going to be helpful certainly for College Board, for the proctors, but are also important for those of us planning to take the test should know. First of all, it is going to be designed to be able to be used on a laptop or a tablet. This will give more flexibility to test centers to offer the SAT. So it will not be necessary if there is a location that perhaps doesn't have enough laptops available, but they have tablets available, they will be able to also serve as an SAT test center. So another one is that the device can be either a location provided device or a student's device. Now, this policy is going to depend on the location and on the details of your relationship with the location. For instance, this is likely going to be the case if you are, say, having the SAT administered at your own school. It's likely you'll be able to bring your own device. The software is going to be a secure software, so you will not be able to have the SAT open in one tab and Google open in another tab, of course. But they are trying to be basically as flexible as possible to give as many opportunities as possible for students to take the SAT. And most importantly, and this is based in part on their experiences with the AP exams, they have designed the app to work even if there are internet issues. So unlike some of the digital tests where if there's an internet connection disconnect, students might be in a situation where they have to wait for the internet to reconnect and may have their test delayed and all of that. The way the digital SAT app is designed is that all the information is downloaded into the application. And if there is a issue with the internet during the test, that doesn't stop the test experience whatsoever. The test experience continues seamlessly, and then there'll be an opportunity after the test to upload the results and essentially not need to stop and deal with any internet issues during the test. All right. So one huge advantage for the digital SAT is that it's going to be a shorter test. I mean, it's going to be a 2-hour test instead of a 3-hour test. This is really huge. This is really a big deal. It's going to be much less of a time commitment, both when you go to take the actual test, but also in your preparation. One of the key things that you want to do in your preparation for the SAT is to take as many practice tests as possible. And so being able to take a test in 2 hours instead of 3 hours is going to be incredible for endurance, for fatigue. It's going to also be incredible for allowing you to take more practice tests because you need less time. So now, what does that mean? How are we going to get a shorter test? Well, first of all, we're going to have shorter sections. We're also going to have fewer questions, which is going to reduce fatigue. Now, taking these apart a little bit, the shorter sections, as we're about to see, is that we're going to have a computer adaptive test. And I'm going to discuss what that is and how that is going to look like in the SAT in a moment. but the sections are going to be significantly shorter. We do not have exact details yet, but based on the overall time and the discussion of the restructure of the SAT, we're anticipating approximately 30-minute sections. There are going to be fewer questions, obviously in one sense, because there's going to be less time, but College Board has in fact said that there will be more time per question allotted. So there will be significantly fewer questions. It won't simply be 2/3 of the 165 questions we see on the current SAT. It's going to be even fewer questions than that because College Board has announced there will be more time per question. And then reduced fatigue, of course, we're going to get into that because it's just a shorter test. Now, a few things are going to happen with this test is not only is it going to be shorter overall, they're streamlining parts of it as well. They're making it a easier test in some ways. Well, not necessarily easier, but it's going to be a different test. A big one, and I've been able to see, we're going to do a Q&A at the end, and so we'll gather up these questions. But I know one of the concerns for many of you is the English portion of the SAT. My experiences with my colleagues in India, as well as students I've had from India, is that the math is usually not much of an issue. It's the English. And one of the big things that they've already said is that they're going to use shorter reading passages. And so there's going to be many short reading passages with only one question per passage. And so certainly this is going to change how we're going to approach reading. In fact, it's probably, we have to wait and see until we get some examples. What it's going to do is going to make the approach that we teach our students a lot easier to apply. One of the things currently that we teach our students is you need to identify and read the portion of the passage that answers the question. Well, if the passage is only 10 or 15 lines long, that is the portion you need. And so this is certainly going to change approaches. We're going to adjust things. And that is one thing that my colleagues and myself are working on, is what are the changes we need to do. But this, I think, will turn out to be an advantage for many students. Another one that'll be an advantage, and it'll probably be a big sigh of relief for many of you, is that the math section is going to have fewer word problems. And so the word problems that are going to appear are going to be less wordy. They're going to be more concise, but there are going to be fewer word problems that are going to trip you up, and they're going to let you show off your math skills more than simply, can you read this massive pile of text? Another key change in the math section is that they're going to have a built-in graphing calculator. And they have announced that for both sections, you are going to be allowed your calculator. Now, the last big change, and this is part of the way that the SAT is able to be shorter, is that it's going to be a computer adaptive test. And so what do we mean by computer adaptive test? And so the way that the SAT is going computer adaptive is going to be similar to what the GRE currently does and not similar to what the GMAT does. So computer adaptive tests. So the theory behind a computer adaptive test is that a computer adaptive test uses students' performance on one part of the test to affect what questions they see, those students see on the next part of the test. And so on the SAT, you're going to have two sections each of verbal and math. And so what's going to happen is that the first section will be the same for everyone. Depending on your performance on each section, that first section, your second section will be different. If you do well on the first section, you're going to get a second section that is going to be mostly hard questions. If you do okay, you're going to get a second section that is mostly medium questions. And if you do poorly, you're going to get a second section that's mostly easy questions. So the theory behind this is that the SAT will be able to assign you a score with fewer questions and therefore be able to be a shorter exam, because the exam is going to be able to adjust to your skill level. If you are a strong student, the easy questions are largely going to be filler because they're easy. You're going to be able to answer them really quickly. And so they do not show much about you as a SAT taker. Conversely, if you're a student who struggles in a particular section, the hard questions are hard and you're probably not going to get them, like you're going to have difficulty getting them correct anyway. And therefore, it makes sense that, well, easier questions are going to be more reflective of your ability and be more able to figure out what score you have. And so your score for a computer adaptive test is not purely based on the number of questions you get correct. And I want to repeat this because this is oftentimes a confusion among students. They think, oh, well, that's kind of unfair. If I do well in the first section, I get up with a harder section. I'm not going to get as many questions right, potentially. Well, the point is that your score is calculated based on a combination of both how many questions you write, but also, and more importantly, how difficult those questions are. So you don't need to worry about, oh, well, if I do well, I might be harming my score overall. You're not going to be harming your score overall because the scoring is going to affect that. Now, in addition to the test being able to be shorter as a computer adaptive test, another big benefit of the computer adaptive test is that it's going to be a more secure test and be more unique for each student. So security, many of you might have known, has been an issue for the SAT in the past. There have been tests that have been leaked, that somehow students have gotten copies of tests prior to the tests being administered. And so the test being a computer test means that they don't need to ship boxes of physical tests around the world. It is all digital, and so it can be more secure. And also, it being a unique exam means that every student gets an exam that is adjusted for that student, which also cuts down on the possibility of cheating, which is huge for the College Board, obviously, because they've been criticized for the lack of security on the test. And it also helps to you as students because you don't have to worry about questions about your performance on the test. There's no question about whether you cheated on your neighbor because you had a different test than your neighbor. This also helps to explain what the College Board was able to keep the same between the pencil and paper SAT and the digital SAT. So this is what College Board has said explicitly about the digital SAT. So they say that the test is going to continue to measure the same skills and knowledge. In other words, they're not going to change the content that appears on the test, and they're not going to change what they claim to be testing skill-wise on the digital SAT. And they are the things that they claim they matter for college and career readiness. Now, as someone who's taught these tests for a very long time, I disagree about whether the SAT truly shows college and career readiness. But it is helpful to note that they definitely are testing the same things that the SAT has been testing for the past 6 years. And so this is really helpful because this means that even though the format of the test is going to change, all the materials that are available currently for the pencil and paper SAT are still going to demonstrate the same skills and knowledge that you're going to need to do on the digital SAT. Certainly, the people that I work with, my colleagues that are developing the materials for the digital SAT, can use everything that we've learned about the current SAT to help us craft those materials. And so don't expect the digital SAT to be a test that is all that different, but there are going to definitely be differences. So question types, the current SAT has reading questions, writing questions, and math questions. The new digital SAT will also have reading, writing, and math questions. Do note that in the digital SAT, rather than having two separate reading and writing sections, reading and writing questions will be within the same section. Now, we do not yet know how those questions are going to be distributed. We don't know if they're going to give you reading questions and then writing questions, or if the questions are going to be interspersed. Once we see a practice test and we can see how they're going to do that, that will affect students' strategies and how they approach that section. And as I mentioned before, the reading questions, rather than being approximately 10 or 11 questions for one passage of approximately 80 lines, there's going to be one question per shorter passage. And so we don't know the exact length of those passages, but I'm guessing around 10 to 15 lines will be about what we'll see, based on other standardized tests that do something similar. But what the questions are going to ask, the formatting of the questions, the style of the questions is going to be largely the same. The test, and this is actually really, I just saw that there was a question in the chat that basically asked this question. And so this is a great time for this. The SAT will still be a mostly multiple choice exam. So the grid in math questions will still be there. The student produced response questions. And so it's still going to be the same sort of test. There's not going to be any typing or writing on the test. It is still going to be a multiple choice test. And so because it's a multiple choice test, we know it's going to have to be a standardized format. Now, the format of the test, as I've mentioned previously, is something we do not know yet. But we just know because of the way multiple choice tests work, and also because of the sorts of skills and knowledge that the SAT wants to test, we know that it is going to have to be a standardized format. And certainly once we know that format, we're going to begin working right away on not only preparing materials to help prepare all of you for the test, but also doing more events such as this to make sure that everyone knows what the format's going to be all about. Because it's going to be largely multiple choice, process elimination is still going to be one of your key strategies. Eliminating wrong answers is absolutely key in every section of a standardized test, such as the SAT. And in particular, in the verbal section, the reading and writing questions, process elimination is still going to be one of the hallmarks of how you should be approaching this test. And because it's multiple choice, any questions that you do not know or any questions that you do not have time to get, you'll be able to do your letter of the day. You'll be able to choose A, B, C, or D, and then just pick that answer on questions you don't get to. This will let you have a 25% chance on a question that you didn't have time to do. This is going to be really important, in particular on an adaptive test in that first section, because any question right in that first section is going to have an outsized effect on your score, because it's going to affect what you get in that second section. So College Board has announced that the digital SAT is still going to be on the 400 to 1600 scale. Do note that the SAT hasn't always been on that scale, even though this has been the most common scale over all of our lifetimes. The reason why the College Board is doing this is that they do want the scores to be comparable. So when it comes to the digital SAT, they want to make it so that if you get a 1450 on the pencil and paper SAT and you're applying with somebody else who had a 1450 on the digital SAT, that colleges don't need to convert from one score to the other. They'll be able to compare it. And so that's because SAT scores are always been based on percentiles. And so SAT score percentiles change slightly from test to test, but it has been the case for years and years and years that a 1500 is 99th percentile, which means you're you did better than or equal to 99% of people who test the test score. A 1300 is around 87th percentile. And so all of these information, all of this is why the digital SAT will be comparable. They'll be able to take the scores and make sure that they result in these sorts of percentiles. So, final thing that's not changing, and the real important thing to keep in mind, the SAT, the digital SAT, is still going to be a standardized test. We here at the Princeton Review have lived through multiple changes of the SAT. Manya, my colleagues there in India, have also been through these changes. And we know, as with any standardized test can be beaten. Any standardized test can be learned, can be mastered, and any standardized test students such as you can do better on. And so we know that whatever sort of changes are happening, and as I've just discussed, a lot of the things that are true about the current SAT are actually not changing. So you're going to be able to do better on the digital SAT. So we know that, of course, that this is a really key idea. So what does that mean for you? So we've seen all of these changes. Well, what are all these changes mean? So first of all, colleges are going to view the SAT in the same way. One of the big things that the College Board needed to do when they decided to make this change is they needed to ensure that whatever happens with the digital SAT is going to be acceptable just the same as the current version. Colleges were consulted on the new SAT. College Board is an organization that has colleges as members. And so through their members that are part of colleges, including people in college admissions teams, were consulted on this new test and all the changes that are being made, and they all coordinated to ensure that everyone is going to be on board with this change. College Board has also run some validity studies. The College Board runs studies constantly on showing that the SAT demonstrates what they claim the SAT demonstrates. With the new SAT, the digital SAT, they have been running versions of it in certain schools in the United States to ensure that the scoring works the way that they want it to work. And there will be continued studies on the digital SAT as it gets administered to more and more students. This is a big part of what the College Board does, is they do a lot of research to show how the SAT works and that it's fair. And then colleges can still be test optional. I know that this is a question that is coming up. Certainly there have been some changes. I believe I saw earlier somebody noted that MIT very recently announced that they are going back to requiring the SAT or the ACT very soon. But just because the test is changing to digital, those schools that have been moving away from the SAT or been doing SAT optional tests are going to be able to continue to be that way. So there is still time to take the pencil and paper test. March 23, as we've announced, is going to be a digital test internationally. PSAT is going to be digital in the fall in the United States. And then by spring of 2024, so March 2024, roughly, all tests are going to be digital. You can still take the current version, as we've mentioned. The paper and pencil test is offered through December 3rd of this year. And so if you're someone who is anxious about all these changes, if you're someone who would prefer to take a test in pencil and paper, you have plenty of time this calendar year to take the SAT. As has been mentioned, SAT scores are good for 4 years. So even if you're in grade 9, that is still a possibility. And you can certainly take both versions. That may be a good opportunity for you. It is very common for students to take the SAT multiple times. At least in the United States, the dominant policy is to take your best scores. And in fact, at many of the very selective schools, such as the Ivy League, Stanford, MIT, you see that many students have taken the SAT at least twice. So certainly reasons why taking the paper SAT might make a lot of sense. The first big one is that it's a known test. What I've shared with you today is basically the information we have right this moment about the digital SAT. We definitely know about the SAT right now. We know the digital SAT has certain things, but the pencil and paper SAT, I have a bunch of books behind me, and actually some of them are next to me as well, that are the SAT. And so the pencil and paper's SAT is a known test. That's a big reason to consider taking it now. There's plenty of practice material available, and we have 6 years experience helping students prepare for the current version of the SAT. Once again, there are a lot of things that are staying the same for the digital SAT. So we here at Manya and the Princeton Review are going to be more than prepared to help you. But the current SAT, the pencil and paper SAT, is really well known. So these recommendations are really basically, so if you're in 9th grade or younger, for most of you, it's probably best to plan on taking the digital test, simply because you're going to have the most opportunities to retake that. 10th and 11th grade, really planning on taking the paper test, because you're going to still have, you've learned the material that you need, in particular in the math, and you're going to have the opportunities to take it. So just as a recap of the timeline, this summer, College Board has said that they will announce the format of the SAT, of the digital test. So how many questions and what number of sections, et cetera. In the fall, they are supposed to release practice tests. March is when the international students will take the digital test. And then fall 2023 is the digital PSAT, which is really the big rollout of this test. Now, there are questions about test optional. So test optional schools are processes that do not require students to submit SAT or ACT scores. However, do note that with test optional schools, even submitting a test can make a big difference for your chances of admission. At many of the schools that have gone test optional, what we've seen is that those students who submit test scores tend to have higher admissions rates. Now, there's a little bit of a challenge of interpreting that piece of data too much, because the sort of students that are going to submit scores are going to be the sort of students that have good scores. And so it's a little hard to extrapolate too far, but it does show that if you have a great score, it can really help your admission chances. Scores can get you scholarships. As Nirmala said earlier, there are big scholarships available within India if you have a great SAT score, but also schools outside of India in the United States and other international locations also often offer scholarships based on SAT or ACT scores. Note, this is oftentimes true even if the admissions process is test optional. So just because a school is test optional doesn't mean that it makes no sense to take the SAT, because it may be worth some nice scholarships. There are also schools that will use SAT or ACT scores for placements. So you may be able to start your college career by taking higher level classes that you would have been able to otherwise. As I mentioned, over 75% of students that were applying to test optional did end up submitting test scores. And we've noted that submitters had higher average test scores and higher average GPA. And so what does this mean is, as we said, like, test optional is good for students. It does give you an option for whether to submit your scores or not. But people who have strong scores and submit them to test optional schools do largely have better chances of being admitted. All right, so I know there are many questions in the chat. So I'm going to turn this back to my colleagues. I'm not quite sure how we want to address the Q&A portion of this.
Adam, we'll pick up a few questions which are related to the topic.
Yep.
Most of the questions related to admissions, students can reach out to us in the given number or write to us in the mail ID we have given, info@maniagroup.com. Our counselors will reach out to them and help them for the admissions related questions. So I'm just picking up the question here. There is one question: do we have to take particular classes or coaching while preparing for the SAT?
So within school, the sorts of classes that are going to be helpful for SAT are going to be your English language classes and your math classes. However, the SAT is really designed as a general test. It is not a test that tests particular subjects. For instance, there are reading passages about science, but you don't need to have taken chemistry and physics and biology to do well on the SAT. Really, what it boils down to is that the SAT is largely a test of how well you do the SAT. What I mean by that is that there is certainly knowledge and skills you're going to develop in school that are going to be helpful, but the SAT is a test that you're going to do better on if you're able to spend some time preparing for the SAT itself. And so certainly checking out, reaching out to Manya, the contact information here on this slide, they can help you discover what sort of options there are for preparing it. But certainly many students find benefit from taking a class specifically designed to help them prepare for the SAT.
Yeah. And the next question here is like, what books can be used for SAT preparation?
So
maybe
I'm going to go
both
grab
paper, pencil and digital. Yeah.
Yeah. So at the Princeton Review, we spend a lot of time and energy creating many books. So I have the 10 practice tests for the SAT book. We also offer our SAT prep books. The College Board sells this book. However, all the practice tests in this book are available on College Board's website for free. So I don't necessarily recommend purchasing this book. Now, as far as the digital SAT is concerned, because the College Board has said that the same skills and knowledge are going to be tested, this will be good practice to help you prepare for that question by question level. At this moment, nobody knows what the actual digital test is going to look like. And so we do not yet have enough information to even make any books. Trust me, the moment that we have any more information, myself and my colleagues are going to be working around the clock to try to get stuff out as quickly as possible. There are digital materials available as well. Like, for instance, we at the Princeton Review do have online practice available. So that is something you can use as well to get used to the working SAT questions on a computer. But as far as preparing for the digital SAT, the current materials are good for understanding the types of questions and the types of knowledge you're going to need for the SAT. However, we're going to need to wait until sometime in the fall to be able to have a more concrete set of specific preparation for the digital test.
Thanks. Another one is, can you get scholarship without SAT?
Certainly. Then certainly when it comes to United States schools, there are many scholarships for many different things. One of the things that is really interesting about the American process in particular is that there are scholarships for things that you would not think there are scholarships for. There are scholarships for people whose last names begin with Z. There are scholarships for people with red hair. There are scholarships for people who are the second child in their family. And so not all scholarships require the SAT, not by a long shot. However, there are a lot that do. And so what I'd recommend really is doing your research. And if scholarships are something that you're particularly interested in, chances are you are going to want to take the SAT and do well on it. But it's certainly not the only factor that's used in scholarships. And even at universities, there's a lot of universities that offer scholarships based purely on high school grades. There are scholarships that are sometimes based on a country of origin. So there are schools of scholarships for students from India, for instance. So.
Great. Next question from Gurbani. In India, can he take paper pencil SAT in December 2022 as a 12th class student?
I'm going to pass that back to you because I'm not quite sure. I'm not as familiar with the Indian context. So I'll have you can answer that, Nirmala.
Yeah. In fact, it would be a little late for you actually, because the admission process starts 1 year before exactly. But yes, you can. That is the last attempt you can give. Okay, December 2022 is the last attempt you can give to submit the scores on time. You can give. Yeah. Next. Okay, another question here from Shreya. Are the students who are going to take the digital SAT in 2023 going to have an advantage compared to those who take up the paper pencil SAT this year in 2020?
There should not be an advantage overall between the two groups of students. In fact, that's going to be one of College Board's main goals in this transition to the digital SAT. College Board wants it to be the case that students who take the pencil and paper test in 2022 and the students who take the digital SAT in 2023 are comparable, that they are in a fair and equitable situation. Now, that's going to be true broadly, like overall. There may be individual students that will have an advantage for one test over the other. For instance, a student who is overly fatigued by the 3-hour SAT as a pencil and paper may find it an advantage to take the digital SAT because it's shorter. Conversely, there may be some students who find it difficult to concentrate when they're looking at a computer screen and thus will do better on the pencil and paper test. So in other words, overall, no, there will not be any advantage for either test. The College Board really doesn't want that. However, for individual students, there may be advantage one way or
another. Okay. There is another question which I will answer. I'm in class 12. When should I give the SAT? Your last attempt can be by December. Okay. If you are in class 12 now, are you going to complete class 12? I'm not sure. If you're going to complete class 12, then actually the timeline is over. If you are in class 12, that is December is the last attempt you can give. Okay. There can be some deadlines for the universities. The last deadline, you can shortlist the university, see if you have timeline to submit your scores, and you can take the exam, the May exam you can take. Okay, there is one more question, Aaron. Which one would you recommend, digital or paper pencil?
Yeah, my recommendation would be based on what grade you're in, essentially. So if you're in 12th grade, you have to take the pencil and paper, as Nirmala has just said. Your last opportunity is December. So I'd recommend take the soonest test you can, because you do want the opportunity to retake it. If you're in grade 11, I would highly recommend still attempting the pencil and paper test. It is the known test right now. Test scores are good for 4 years, and you'll have plenty of time to retake it if you start preparing to take at the latest one of the fall tests, one of the tests, say in August. If you are in grade 9 or 10, my recommendation would be to wait to take the digital SAT, because you'll have more opportunities to retake the digital SAT if necessary. That's the primary reason why I would recommend waiting, is just simply if you take the pencil and paper SAT and you do not get the score you want the first time, then you're likely going to be retaking on the digital. And so it's better to just start with the digital in that case.
Great. Actually, that's it. More related questions for admissions, please reach out to us. Okay. Guys, you can call us on this number, or you can give your questions. You can send your questions to info@maniagroup.com. We are always ready to help you related to admissions, or when you have to take your SAT, when you start your preparation for the SAT, or SAT coaching programs if you're looking for, or the test registrations, or whatever you want, any kind of help related to your study abroad, or even SAT for India, whatever kind of help you want, please reach out to us. That's a great time you have spent, and hope you have great learning about the SAT and the new digital SAT. Aaron, thanks a lot for your time.
Yes, thank you for having me, and thank you for being such a great interactive audience.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, students. Bye all. Reach out to us for any help. Bye.